Hiya, I'm Connor, and today I'm talking about whether you should or shouldn't tip an artist. Now, let's get started with, yes, I want to come into this video and say, hell yeah, tip an artist, tip your artist, they greatly appreciate it, and that is true. You should tip your artist if you really like their work and really want to support them, but you don't have to tip your artists. Now, it's kind of controversial to say don't tip your artists, but tip your artists. Don't not tip them. If you can afford to tip an artist, please tip the artist, but don't feel obligated to if you just don't have the money. That's totally understandable. If you don't have the money, you don't have to tip. But if you do have the money and you know you have the money, I feel like, yes, you should tip your artist. Think of it like a waiter. A waiter gives you your food, gives you the service, and then you tip them out of gratitude. Now, the same should be said about most people who work in that kind of industry. They give you a product, much like artists give you a product, and then you tip them because you liked their work, they were treated you nicely, and you wanted to support them more than you did with the bill that you paid. Most waiters do deserve more of a tip than an artist, in my opinion, obviously, because a lot of waiters are tip based on their salary, but it's not always that way. But in some cases, that is how they are paid. But in artist cases, you're paying for the product. You're paying the price that the artist charges. If the artist wants to complain, hey, you didn't tip me, hey, you should have tipped me, I deserve more than what you're paying, they should have had higher prices. Now, yes, it's great to tip an artist, and you should if you can, but no, it's not okay for an artist to depend on tips rather than depend on their prices that they are charging. I think it's absolute crap if an artist says, hey, you didn't tip me, hey, why didn't you tip me, that kind of thing, and complain that they weren't making enough money. Now, I think if an artist wants to have low prices and they depend on tips for their higher amounts in the prices, so be it. If that's what an artist wants to do, fine, but that's not a good business practice. For a good business practice, you should be charging what you feel your art is worth, and then if the commissioner decides to tip you, great, that's perfect on them, that's amazing for them to do. Now, trust me, I'm not saying I never get tips, I do, I get so much tips that it's crazy, and I'm not going to say, oh, I never get tips, tip me, I'm pissed off. I'm not going to come out and say that because that's not true, because I do get a good amount of tips, and I really appreciate it when someone tips me. As a full-time freelance artist, this is my full-time job. This is what I'm spending 24 hours of my day doing. I can't play video games at the end of the day. I can't go in fursuit at the end of the day. And yes, I'm a furry. Please hate me. I do not care. And yes, I understand how much tips are grateful, and they're really nice to have tips, because I use all my tip money into stuff I want, not stuff I need. That's where all my wants come in. I don't use my money from commissions for stuff I want unless I really have enough, because I pay rent, I pay bills, I pay all of that. I am an adult, and you know, I appreciate when someone tips me. I'm not ungrateful when someone tips me, but I don't expect them to, because I simply don't depend on tips. And no artist should depend on tips instead of what they price. And that's the same for waiters and people who work in that kind of industry. You're not forced to tip those type of people. It is very looked down upon if you do not tip a waiter if they were super nice to you, but it is definitely not legal or illegal not to tip them, because if you feel you didn't get the product or satisfaction from the waitress or artist, whoever you're working with, then no, you don't have to tip them. Most artists, get the tip beforehand, but I just think it's not necessary to tip an artist. It is greatly looked at when you do, and I just think it's amazing if you do tip your artists. If you can afford it, please tip your artists. Artists work so hard, and you have to keep in mind, artists aren't waiters. Artists are, well, I was gonna say tattoo people, but they are artists. Artists are people who work years and years mastering the art that you're getting. They spent years getting to the point where they are when you commission them. Or, well, if you commission a beginner, that's a different story. But they take time out of their day, just like any other person who works a wage job. They take time to get to that skill level, and I just think, yes, you should tip your artists. It's greatly looked at, and that's really all I have to say about this matter. Yeah, tip your artists. It's just a good thing to do. No, legally, you don't have to, but I just think it's really necessary if you want to show an artist that you appreciate them and like their work. Other than that, this is my first video. I hope you enjoy. I hope you decide to subscribe, and I'll be uploading every week. I hope you're ready to see more trash from this trash mammal. See ya.